It's the 1st of September 2023. I'm in my living room waiting for Amazon to deliver my premium edition copy of Starfield because instead of getting the digital version, I have to painfully wait for it to be delivered, all because I wanted a shiny steelbook that I know I will never use. It's 6 PM and it finally arrives, so I practically lost a whole day of the early access. Thank you, Amazon. I have already installed the game thanks to Game Pass and just need to pop in the code so I can access the game early. I spend the next month relentlessly playing this game until one day I couldn't play anymore. I felt as if I'd seen everything that Starfield had to offer, and this was heartbreaking for me as I was anticipating this game since it was announced back at E3. I still play Skyrim, New Vegas and Fallout 4 and expected Starfield to give me the same kind of enjoyment. And yeah, Starfield hasn't been out that long, so there is plenty of time for Bethesda to tweak and add things to the game. I've spent the last month mulling over whether I should make this video, and it became clear that I need to share my experience with you. So, where did it go wrong? Starfield feels like it took the core features out of previous Bethesda games and just expanded on them, without any real thought on how these features would shape the overall game. And this has left Starfield feeling disjointed, as exploration feels dull, the main story isn't compelling enough for me to care, and it takes a step back on what makes RPG games special. But at the same time, there is fun to be had in Starfield. I still think it's a good game. Whenever I play Tears of the Kingdom, Skyrim, The Witcher 3 or Fallout 4, a lot of the enjoyment I get in these games is when I go off the beaten path. Let's say I am travelling through Hyrule to look for clues on Zelda's whereabouts. Whether it's a cave that might have some valuable gear, or it's someone who has a quest for me, there is always something to do that fills me with intrigue, and nearly every time I am rewarded for exploring. Starfield isn't structured in a way where it is able to impart the same feeling. The main problem is the loading screens. In 2015, The Witcher 3 released with a semi-open world with minimal loading screens. Fallout 4 was also released in this year. Loading screens were something that the industry thought was outdated back then and began preparing ways to minimalize or phase them out entirely. Some games try to hide them through narrow hallways, climbing sections, and even elevator rides. I didn't have a problem with loading screens in Fallout 4 or Skyrim because it's used when entering into a building or a town, behind a door or a massive gated entrance where I cannot see what's happening on the other side. So in a way, it's kind of like opening a door in real life. With Starfield, I can see where I need to go, and yet I cannot reach it due to these restrictions, and it feels a lot more immersion breaking. I have to go into the menus to land on a planet, even though I can see that planet.
That isn't just a backdrop. That moon is actually there orbiting the planet. Yes, you can visit it too.
One of the key things for this generation of hardware was the power of the SSD. We are now able to experience games with minimal loading times. I've just finished Spider-Man 2, and they used the power of the SSD to their advantage almost flawlessly. Starfield is more about navigating menus rather than exploring the stars. If you are patient enough though, you will have those random events that make these games fun when you are travelling from A to B. You can come across NPCs in need of help, bounty hunters, and more, but the structure is so bad that eventually you will get tired of it and start fast travelling to get to your destination, as it is just one loading screen instead of 4. Fast travelling everywhere means that you are missing out on the better parts of the game, like the space combat. Space combat is incredibly fun. I had a real good time blasting spaceships and looting what remains were floating in space. I enjoyed having to allocate my power to different systems. It made me feel like I was Han Solo in my very own Millennium Falcon. If I'm skipping the ship combat due to loading screens, That nearly renders spaceship customization useless. It no longer matters how I customize my spaceship because I'm fast traveling everywhere to reduce the amount of loading screens. What's the point in changing my weapon systems if I am barely going to be in space to use them? And spaceship customization is another great feature. I'm not as creative as others, but I have seen some great ship builds online. The first spaceship you get cannot reach certain star systems because you need to have a larger fuel tank and longer jump range. This and swapping out the HAB module so you can craft on your ship were the only reasons I could find that keep spaceship customization worthwhile. Starfield had me travelling to different planets to finish quests and move on to the next one, which didn't leave any room for space exploration. Planetary exploration isn't much better either, as majority of these planets are devoid of any handcrafted content, which raises the question, why did we need 1,000 planets? Who were they for? Because regardless of what planet or star system you visit, you are limited to a few things you can do. You can fully survey a planet where you can scan flora, fauna and resources. You also have to find planetary traits, which requires you to find a location on the map. Besides being another thing to scan, they don't serve any other purpose. Starfield procedurally generates its content when exploring a planet, so when you are searching these locations you can find abandoned outposts, facilities, caves, cryolabs and more, but there just isn't enough incentive or a variety of layouts at these locations to make exploration worthwhile. Within a few hours of my playthrough, I found the same type of generated building on 2 different planets. They had the same type of enemy placements and loot, and once I noticed this, it put me off exploring because I knew what I was getting. So, if these 1,000 planets are not fun to explore, what else can you do? One of my favourite things in Fallout 4 is the settlement system. While it could have been executed in a better way, I still had a lot of fun with things you could create with it. The settlement system makes sense in Fallout as it's set after the apocalypse, where supplies and resources are low, so the player should be searching for resources and trying to help rebuild society. It's the procedural quests that the player is asked to do which brings the system down. Starfield's outpost system is an improvement over its predecessor, but I have to question the reason for its implementation. We aren't in a post-apocalyptic setting, so I don't need to scavenge for resources, and you can earn money pretty fast. The outpost system in Starfield is focused around generating resources, but it takes resources to build generators and resource extractors, so effectively you need resources to get resources, and because resources are scattered across different planets and star systems, you are back to fast travelling around again. I spent hours trying to set up outposts and cargo links to get all my resources at one outpost, and I kept running out of resources, so I ended up fast travelling to Midtown Minerals in Aquila City to buy more. And once I realised what I was doing, it broke the whole reason for the outpost system. Why am I working this hard to gather resources when I can just fast travel to all the resource shops and buy them? I couldn't find a compelling reason to continue using the outpost system, which feels like another missed opportunity. In my first playthrough, I built my character around outpost buildings with the idea that I'd enjoy making outposts and gathering resources, so my character wasn't spec'd great when it came to combat. So I started again, and on my second playthrough I ignored the outposts and focused solely on missions. And it pains me to say this, but Starfield, as one of the worst main stories I've ever played, was the idea to scatter the artifacts all over the star system and hope the players would stick around and explore those planets that the artifacts were on, because it fails in its execution again. I didn't feel like I was exploring. I was being told to go to this location to kill some pirates and get the artifact, or go to this temple to acquire a new power, and that repetitive catch the light to gain the power thing is so jarring. This isn't creative in a narrative or a gameplay sense. There are a handful of missions that pair you with other members of Constellation to get an artifact, and you'll learn a bit more about who they are, but it doesn't add anything to the overarching plot. There are 1 or 2 moments that piqued my interest. The mission, High Price to Pay, where you have to choose which of your 2 most used companions die, really did catch me off guard. When I reached this point in my first playthrough, I was already married to Sarah, and I couldn't tell whether this was because it was something I did in the game. It was sad and funny at the same time because I started to roleplay my character as if the world was against me. It was the perfect time to join the Crimson Fleet. The choice for which companion to save felt like the only meaningful choice in the game. It was something I genuinely thought I would have to live with during that playthrough, until the rest of the main story unraveled and you reach New Game Plus. Every other choice doesn't matter because the quests are not designed in a way to have any lasting impact. For example, when completing the 3-star collective faction quest, Ron Holt tries to bribe you with 20,000 credits to ignore his atrocities. Once you threaten to tell the Marshal, he mentions that if he is removed from power, it will ruin the company and affect the livelihood of the workers and their families. So you have a choice to either be paid off and accept that Ron Holt done these bad deeds, or you can attempt to arrest him. I attempted to arrest him, which ultimately leads to his death. After that, Ron's second in command takes over, and that's it. We don't see this person, there are no changes in Hopetown, and it's only ever mentioned when you speak to your companions about the decisions you make. And this is what happens when you complete every faction questline. No impact, no real consequence, so no reason for me to care. All the quest lines can be played independently without locking you out of the other. Every quest line usually revolves around someone within that faction who is corrupt and is pulling the strings to get a personal gain. Vey Victus, Ron Ho, and Ularu Chen. It's quite telling that the favoured faction questline is the Crimson Fleet one, because they are up against the UC sister and you have to choose who to side with. And this questline has its issues too. Not a single NPC felt threatening on any level. The Crimson Pirates were just rude. They just tell you to shut up all the time.
Down and your mouth shut.
Shut up and listen.
So keep your mouth shut now. Keep your mouth shut.
Besides asking you to kill someone at the start of their questline, it doesn't do enough to really push who they are. Bethesda has a ton of lore for Starfield, which is only used in the UC Vanguard questline. Why not have the UC and the 3-star collective at odds with each other again? Have your character pick a side based on faction motivations with a sprinkle of ambiguity, or even be independent and try to de-escalate the situation at hand, or be a tyrant and take on both factions and build a following of your own. They could have done so much more. And it's the same for the skills. The skills mainly consist on getting better at something, like using your jetpacks or better handling on your spaceship, gaining something additional, like extra cargo links or more ammo when you scavenge, or increasing something by a percentage, like 10% extra damage with ballistic weapons. None of the skills seem to synergize in unique ways to create different experiences. The skills are just there to make you better at something rather than making a specific character build. People say Fallout 4 is more of an FPS than an RPG, and I think Starfield has taken a further step into being an FPS with RPG elements. So, I have one final question. What makes a role-playing game? Bethesda games are unique as they appeal to the fan base for different reasons, whether it's the exploration, character builds, mods, the gunplay. For me, I like playing games that have choices that are morally ambiguous and lasting consequences that shape the world, like in New Vegas. I like speccing my character to make different builds, like having a high look at that build on Fallout or a destruction mage on Skyrim. I like moments in my game that catches me off guard, things that could only happen to me, so when I talk about it with my friends, we have different experiences. I like being able to handle situations in different ways, whether that is talking myself out of a situation, setting traps, going in stealth and more. After my time with Starfield, I don't feel as if it meets any of those expectations. Starfield is a shallow experience because it's as wide as the sea but as deep as a puddle. It took the quest structure from Skyrim with its independent questline and radiant quests and expanded on it. We got the outpost system, spaceship combat and customization, which are great additions to the game, but it's ultimately weakened due to the structure of exploration. Gunplay felt alright. I'm far from an expert on how a gun should function, so you should check out It's Your Boy Brandy Boy's video as it's quite interesting. I'll leave a link to the video in the description. Honestly, it was hard to write as Bethesda are probably my favourite developers in the past 10 years, and I've had to take off the rose tinted glasses and truly see this game for what it is. My name is Jammer, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.